What are your thoughts on the effect of actually labeling something as horror and that effect on people's ability to experience something? Because I've seen things that were not even necessarily supposed to be labeled horror or strictly speaking horror, which were scarier than any horror movie that I've ever seen.
Give us an example.
Probably the most ridiculous example I can come up with. I once watched a cartoon from back in the 90s called Cat Dog. One of the episodes involves a hairy blue man with the head of a bologna sandwich coming to life and chasing Cat Dog through their house trying to eat them or kill them or something. And that was really scary to me because of the way they presented it. And now it wouldn't scare me now, but the way it completely catches you off guard to see something like that in a cartoon that's normally supposed to be purely comedy. Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
Especially like during like the 80s and the early 90s that I remember, there were always like weird episodes where they were terrifying. By adult standards, like it was like really dark episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Oh, I love that one.
If you rewatch that now, that show is genuinely terrifying. So good. Oh my God, the stuff that they got away with was seemed like the psychotic barber that just wants to shave things, like chasing this poor dog around. Oh my God.
Well, this gets back to what you were saying earlier about horror being defined as like, well, it's got the word horror on it, or weird, or terror, or whatever, and the little skull on in the logo. But it begs the question: should you put that label on there? But this is you're
We don't want to
basically
trick our
asking.
audience too.
That's true, but you do sometimes. You do. I mean, he's saying that sometimes that actually makes for
Well,
Scarier
it's a surprise.
because it's a surprise
Because you're
scare.
not,
I mean, it gets back to the problem of genre. Like, when you put a genre label on everything, then people know exactly what to expect. But then again, audiences kind of, we need a little bit of, preparation. And, we don't realize just how much our stories, I mean, I find all the time that, oh my God, I wrote this story and I thought it was the most original thing ever, but it's following a pretty set formula, often. And everything does.
Horror is one of those genres where it is so impactful on somebody, and you're dealing with people's anxieties, their personal fears. No one ever says, "Oh, that was a pleasant surprise horror movie." They're weeping and
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You're digging into people, and so and you're uncovering a lot of anxiety. So people want to be prepared, and there's and I think that's the reason that there's this modern genre of really really scary horror films that are not about gore. They're about the jump scares and the terror and the creeping dread, Insidious, and that ilk of film. That are really fun, but they're very but there's a ritual that you know what to expect, you know how the process is going to go, because the scares are so crafted that you kind of have to telegraph them a little bit in order to make them bearable, because otherwise it just needs to be too much.
That's why I like the stuff that's sort of borderline art film, and quite often goes out of genre boundaries, and also a lot of times in sort of art film, because you kind of don't necessarily have the same structures that you do with sort of most films here, not necessarily the same genre boundaries. So I actually really like that fuzzy zone surrounding horror that's not quite labeled as horror. I don't know. I mean, what you're talking about though is almost sort of something else, which is that sort of weird sort of area of sort of stuff you become aware of as a child that sort of creeps you out, that is hard to define now. Growing up in the UK in the early 80s, that was like a golden age of kinder trauma. There was a lot of very strange stuff.
Just walking into the video store with like a cornucopia of
just watching TV, and there would be little educational films on. One of them was to make sure you knew that you probably shouldn't put a rug on a polished floor because it might slip. This fucking thing traumatized me for life. It's like someone lays out a rug and then they cut to a man trap and there's this gravelly voice saying, "Oh, you might as well put out a man trap." And you see the person who's just put up the rug sort of greeting their husband as they come in the door, and then cut to their horrified face. You hear all kinds of snapping noises as the rug does its deadly business. This thing like once a week when I do that.
Wow. Yeah. But I think that's also the nature of childhood, is that you find art where children are very scareable, which is why I make art for children. And they're sensitive. They're sensitive to all kinds of anxieties. That's how you discover, work out. That's part of growing up, is experiencing all this anxiety and then learning to let it go or to fight through it or whatever. But I think that we can't reproduce that.
I think it's the difference between horror as a genre and being horrified.
Yeah.
So horror as a genre takes that feeling of, oh my God, I just watched 15 sharks turn on one tiny shark, and I'm sitting here in SeaWorld, and the blood in the water still sticks with me. That's being horrified. Jaws takes that, structures it, and lets you experience it, move past it, and that's horror. It's taking the uncontrolled fear of things that are unexpected as a child, things that get your
Bologna sandwich, man.
yeah. Just make the hairs on the back of your
I'm
neck.
terrified of bologna sandwich.
Yeah.
And it lets you process it more in a more organized way. So
Yeah.
that's really the fundamental difference between something labeled as horror as a genre and something that is just scary because you're not expecting it or because it hits your buttons in just the right way at the right time, even though that may not have been the intent.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you everyone for tuning in.